he found her hiding in the hayloft during the Christmas storm and murmured, "You're safe here." The wind had begun to howl over the fields long before night fell, shaking the trees and sending snow swirling through the narrow paths that ran between the farms. The town of Willow Creek was small, with houses spaced far apart, each surrounded by white-covered fields and old wooden fences. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the wind as it rattled the shutters and roof tiles of the old buildings. It was Christmas Eve, but there was no sign of the usual holiday cheer in the weather. A storm had come quickly, and it was clear it would not be a quiet night. Ethan pulled his coat tighter around himself, the cold biting through even the thick wool. He had spent the afternoon preparing his small farmhouse for the coming night, but he still needed to check on the animals. The snow had piled high, making it difficult to move through the yard. Each step left a deep print behind him as he trudged across the frozen ground, lantern in hand. The light flickered against the falling snow, casting long shadows over the barn and the fields beyond. The animals in the barn stirred as he entered, and their soft noises offered a strange comfort against the harshness of the storm outside. As he moved from stall to stall, feeding and checking on the livestock, he felt a strange sense that something was off. The storm had brought with it the usual signs of winter, the chill, the quiet, and the isolation, but tonight there was something more. A faint sound, almost too soft to notice over the wind, reached his ears. He paused, listening carefully. There it was again, a faint rustling coming from the upper level of the barn. His heart quickened, but he remained calm, telling himself it was probably just the hay shifting in the wind. Clara crouched in the corner of the hayloft, hugging her knees to her chest. The wind rattled the old wooden beams above her, and the snow pressed heavily against the roof. Best, she had run from home, desperate to escape a world that had suddenly felt unsafe. Her father had yelled again that morning, frustrated over something she had not even understood, and her mother had simply watched, saying nothing. Fear had driven her out into the cold, and she had walked for hours through the snow, unsure of where she was going or how she would survive the night. When she saw the barn through the white haze, it had felt like a miracle. She had slipped inside as quietly as she could, hoping no one would notice her. But now, as the sound of footsteps grew closer, her heart thumped painfully against her ribs. Ethan climbed the ladder to the hayloft carefully, his lantern held high. The faint light fell on the bundles of hay, the dust shimmering in the glow. He moved slowly, aware that someone, or something, might be hiding among the bales. The rustling grew louder, and he stopped, whispering gently, "Hello? Is someone there?" Clara flinched, pressing herself farther into the corner. She had expected to be discovered eventually, but not so soon. Not in this way. Her voice caught in her throat. She didn't know if she could speak without crying, and so she remained silent, hoping that whoever it was would simply leave. But Ethan was not like that. His eyes, bright and kind in the lantern light, scanned the loft carefully, and when he finally saw her huddled in the corner, he stopped a few feet away and knelt down to make himself less threatening. "Hey," he said softly, his voice steady and calm. "You're safe here. Don't be afraid." The words were simple, but they carried warmth. Clara blinked at him, unsure if she should trust him. Everything inside her told her to run, to keep moving, to never stay in one place where someone could find her. But the storm outside was fierce, and the barn was the only place that offered any shelter. Hesitantly, she lifted her head slightly, revealing a pale face streaked with tears and snow. Ethan's eyes softened as he saw her, and he reached into his coat to pull out a warm blanket. "Here," he said, draping it gently over her shoulders. "It'll help a little. You must be freezing." Clara swallowed hard. The warmth from the blanket seeped into her cold, trembling body. For the first time that day, she felt a flicker of relief. She nodded slightly, but said nothing. Her trust was not easily earned. Not after the morning she had endured. Ethan understood that. He didn't push her to speak. Instead, he moved to a corner of the loft and began stacking some loose hay for her to sit on. He spoke in a calm, quiet voice, explaining where she could sit safely and how to keep warm without startling the animals below. The wind outside continued to batter the barn, shaking the walls and sending snow down through the cracks. But inside, a small bubble of safety existed. Clara curled up on the makeshift seat, the blanket wrapped tightly around her. She felt vulnerable, but also strangely protected. Ethan moved around the loft quietly, feeding the animals and checking the structure of the barn, all the while speaking to her in a soft, reassuring tone. It was strange how comforting a stranger could be, even when everything outside screamed danger. The storm raged on, but inside the barn, time seemed suspended. Clara began to share small bits of her story, each word tentative and careful. Ethan listened without judgment, nodding and occasionally asking gentle questions. There was no rush, no pressure, just a quiet understanding that sometimes the simplest act of listening could save someone in more ways than one. At one point, a particularly strong gust of wind made the barn shudder. Clara flinched and buried her face in the blanket, shivering despite its warmth. Ethan placed a hand gently on her shoulder, just enough to reassure her without crowding her space. "It's okay," he murmured. "Nothing's going to happen to you here." "You're safe for now." Her eyes met his, and she saw the truth in his words. There was no threat in his presence, only the kind of care she had not felt in a long time. It was a simple moment, yet it carried the weight of hope, a hope she had not realized she had been missing. By the time midnight approached, the barn was quiet, except for the soft whistling of the wind outside. Clara had stopped shivering, the blanket and Ethan's quiet presence helping her regain some sense of calm. She closed her eyes, letting herself rest for the first time that day. Ethan stayed nearby, watching the animals, but always keeping an eye on her. The night was far from over, and the storm still raged, but there was a sense of peace in the small loft, a fragile calm in the midst of chaos. It was in that moment, as the snow fell silently around the barn, and the wind howled outside like an untamed spirit, that Clara realized something important. Not all strangers were dangerous, and sometimes help came when it was needed most. Ethan had found her in the cold, the storm, and the darkness, and in doing so he had given her something far greater than shelter. He had given her safety, comfort, and the first spark of hope she had felt in days. As she drifted into a light sleep, the warmth of the blanket and the quiet sound of Ethan's voice speaking softly to the animals below mingled together. Outside, the storm continued its furious dance, but inside a bond had begun to form, a bond that neither of them yet fully understood, but one that would carry them through the night and into the uncertain days ahead. Clara did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if she would have the courage to face her family again, or how the storm would shape the rest of her journey. But for this night, for these few hours, she was safe, and that was enough. And somewhere in the barn, amidst the hay and the snow, Ethan whispered to himself, almost to the wind, "She'll be all right. She's safe here." And for the first time in a long while, Clara believed it. The storm showed no signs of stopping when Clara woke. The snow had settled thickly around the barn, piling up against the wooden walls and drifting over the gates. Outside, the world was silent except for the occasional groan of a tree bending under the weight of ice and snow. Inside, the barn was warm in comparison. The animals had quieted, and the faint smell of hay mixed with the scent of wood smoke gave the space a sense of comfort that Clara hadn't felt in days. She stretched, shivering slightly, and realized she had slept longer than she had thought. Ethan was already moving around the loft, checking on the animals below before attending to the small chores he had left unfinished the night before. His presence was steady and calm, and it reminded Clara that she wasn't entirely alone. When she opened her eyes and saw him, she felt a strange mix of relief and hesitation. She wanted to trust him completely, but part of her still worried that the safety she felt might be temporary. Ethan noticed her stirring and offered a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice low and soothing. "Did you sleep well?" I think so," she admitted. Her voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the thick air in the loft. The blanket helped a lot. "Here," he said. "It's not much, but it will warm you up." Clara took the cup, feeling the heat seep into her hands and then slowly into her chest. She sipped carefully, savoring the warmth as it ran down her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. She hadn't realized how much she needed comfort until that moment. Ethan nodded, sitting down a short distance away on a bale of hay. "You don't have to say much," he said softly. "Just take your time." Clara watched him for a moment, noticing the gentle way he moved, the careful attention he gave to the animals, and the calm determination in his eyes. There was no rush, no judgment, no expectation. For the first time in a long while, she felt that she could breathe without worrying about being punished or scolded. After a few minutes of quiet sipping, Clara found herself speaking, though her words were halting. "I ran away," she said. Her voice shook slightly. "I couldn't stay home tonight. My parents... They were angry, and I didn't know what to do." Ethan nodded, listening closely without interrupting. "You did the right thing by finding shelter," he said gently. "Being outside in a storm like this alone, it wouldn't have been safe." Clara lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of her own emotions. She hadn't told anyone in years about her fears and worries, and the act of speaking them aloud made her feel vulnerable. "I didn't mean to trouble anyone," she whispered. I just wanted to be away from everything for a while." "You're not troubling anyone," Ethan said firmly. "It takes courage to leave a situation when it feels unsafe. You did what you had to do to protect yourself." His words were simple, but they carried an honesty and warmth that made her chest feel lighter. For a while, the only sounds were the occasional rustle of hay and the distant howl of the wind outside. Clara sipped her tea, letting Ethan's calm presence steady her. She began to notice small details in the barn she hadn't before. The way the light from the lanterns reflected off the dust in the air, the soft padding of the animals moving in their stalls, and the faint smell of pine from the wreath Ethan had hung near the door as a small gesture of Christmas cheer. Do you usually stay up here during storms?" Clara asked, trying to start a new conversation, to move away from her own fears. Ethan chuckled softly. "Not always," he admitted, "but I like to make sure the animals are safe, and sometimes that means staying in the barn longer than I planned. I've had my fair share of winter storms." He paused, glancing out the small window where snowflakes danced in the light. "It's quiet, but it can feel lonely if you're not careful." Clara nodded. She understood exactly what he meant. Loneliness had been her companion for a long time, even in her own home. She had never had anyone to talk to about her worries or fears, and now, sitting across from Ethan, she felt that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had thought. As the morning passed, the storm outside began to show small signs of slowing. The wind still whistled, but it no longer tore through the trees with the same force. Snowflakes still fell, soft and thick, covering the world in white, but it seemed less threatening than before. Ethan took the opportunity to gather some extra hay and fresh water for the animals, explaining to Clara how he did it and why it was important. "You can help if you want," he said kindly. "It's not difficult, and it will keep you busy while the storm passes." "I'd like that," she said. She followed him down the ladder, carefully, feeling the warmth of her blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Together they worked quietly, carrying bales of hay and filling water troughs. It was simple work, but it gave Clara a sense of purpose, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan guided her with patience, showing her the small details she needed to know, and encouraging her when she did something well. Every now and then he would glance at her with a reassuring smile, and she felt a flicker of pride. During a small break, they sat on a stack of hay, sipping water and watching the snow outside. Clara felt a strange mix of calm and nervousness. She wanted to speak more about her life, about the fears that had driven her to run, but she wasn't sure how much to share. Ethan, sensing her hesitation, said nothing, simply offering a comforting presence. Sometimes silence, she realized, was just as valuable as words. After a few minutes, Clara finally spoke again. I've never stayed away from home like this before," she admitted. "I didn't think I could make it through the night, but I'm here. I don't know how, but I am." "You made it through. That's what matters. And you'll make it through the rest, too, one step at a time." The simplicity of his words struck her. She had spent so long worrying about the future, about what might happen next, that she had forgotten how to take life slowly, one moment at a time. Sitting there with Ethan, helping with the animals, listening to the storm outside without panicking. It felt like the first time she had truly breathed in weeks. By mid-afternoon, the storm had slowed considerably. The snow still covered the ground thickly, but it no longer whipped through the trees. The sky, once gray and menacing, now showed hints of soft blue. Ethan opened the barn doors slightly to let some fresh air in, careful not to let the warmth escape. Clara stepped out briefly, her boots crunching in the snow, and felt the crisp air fill her lungs. It was cold, but it was beautiful in its own quiet way. "See?" Ethan said, smiling as he watched her. "The worst is over, at least for now. You'll be able to get home safely soon." Clara nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Going home still worried her, but she also felt a little braver than before. The storm had tested her, and she had survived it. With Ethan's help, she had found a safe place, even if just for the night. As the sun began to dip behind the snow-covered hills, the barn filled with a warm, golden light. Clara sat with Ethan, sipping the last of her tea, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself to feel a sense of peace. The storm had been terrifying, but it had also led her here, to this quiet, safe place, and to someone who genuinely cared. By evening, Clara felt ready to face the world outside the barn once more. The storm had passed, and though the snow still covered the ground, the path forward seemed clearer. She knew there were challenges ahead, especially at home, but for the first time she felt that she had a small anchor in the storm. a person she could trust, someone who would help her find her way. Ethan noticed the change in her demeanor. "You're stronger than you think," he said gently. "Storms like this, they test us. But you made it through, and you'll keep going." Clara smiled faintly, feeling a quiet gratitude she couldn't fully put into words. She had been scared, cold, and alone, but now she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. And it was because someone had taken the time to listen, to care, and to help her find a safe place when she needed it most. The barn was quiet now, peaceful after the chaos of the storm. Outside, the world was still blanketed in snow, sparkling under the last light of the day. Inside, Clara felt warmth in more than just her body. She felt it in her heart, in the calm that came from being seen and understood. The storm had brought fear and uncertainty, but it had also brought her here, to a place where she could begin to heal, and to someone who had quietly become her guide through the night. And as they sat together in the fading light, the bond between them began to grow, slowly but surely rooted in trust, kindness, and the simple truth that sometimes help arrives when it is needed most. The storm had finally passed, leaving the world outside blanketed in thick, soft snow. The form looked magical, like a scene from a painting. Fields of untouched white, icicles sparkling on the eaves, and frost tracing delicate patterns along the windows. The silence of the morning was almost sacred, broken only by the occasional crunch of snow beneath a hoof or the distant cry of a bird. Barn, warmth and light created a world separate from the cold, a world where Clara felt the tiniest sense of safety and belonging. Clara had spent the early morning helping Ethan with small chores, stacking hay and checking water troughs, but now she found herself sitting on a bale of hay, her knees pulled up to her chest, watching him move among the animals. Ethan's presence was calm and steady, a reminder that life, even in its challenges, could have rhythm and balance. For Clara, this simple observation brought a strange comfort, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. "You've done well," Ethan said, noticing her gaze. He smiled without speaking too much, his eyes kind. Most people your age would be terrified to be out in a storm like last night, let alone help with chores. Clara shifted uncomfortably, but felt a small glow of pride. I just wanted to help," she said softly. "I didn't want to just sit there and do nothing." Ethan nodded. "That's good. Action can make fear easier to manage sometimes." Clara looked at him, studying his face. She had never met someone so patient and calm. Even when she had been scared or uncertain, he had never rushed her or judged her. He had simply been there, a quiet presence that made her feel she could breathe again. She wanted to speak more about herself, about why she had run, but the words caught in her throat. Still, she felt an urge to try, to share at least a part of her story with someone who might understand. "Can I tell you something?" she asked tentatively. "Of course," Ethan replied without hesitation. He settled on another bale of hay, leaning slightly forward as if ready to listen. Clara took a deep breath. I've never been good at standing up for myself," she began. "At home, my parents argue a lot. I try to stay out of the way, but sometimes it's too much. I feel like I don't belong anywhere." Ethan listened quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. There was no judgment, no interruption, just attention and understanding. Clara felt the tight knot in her chest loosen slightly, knowing that someone was hearing her without criticism. "That sounds very hard," he said softly. "Feeling like you don't belong, that's a heavy burden to carry." Clara nodded, blinking back tears she hadn't realized were forming. "I ran because I didn't know where else to go," she admitted. "I didn't want to be stuck in the house, listening to the shouting, feeling invisible. I thought, maybe if I got away I could breathe." Ethan's expression softened. "You did what you had to do to protect yourself. That takes courage, even if it doesn't always feel like it." For a moment silence fell between them, filled only by the faint sounds of the barn, the rustle of hay, the soft breathing of animals, and the wind's distant whisper beyond the walls. Clara felt a strange warmth in her chest, a mix of relief, gratitude, and something new. Hope. She had spent so long feeling trapped and unseen that the simple act of being understood was like sunlight breaking through the clouds. Ethan shifted slightly and offered her another cup of warm tea he had prepared earlier. "Here," he said. "It'll help you warm up after being out in the cold." Clara took it, letting the warmth run through her fingers and into her chest. "Thank you," she murmured, feeling the comfort of simple kindness. She realized that the small gestures, the blanket, the tea, the calm voice, meant more than she could put into words. They were proof that not all people treated others with harshness or indifference. Some people, she realized, could be safe havens in the middle of life's storms. As the morning progressed, Ethan suggested they check the fence around the property. "Snow can hide broken boards or weak spots," he explained. "We need to make sure the animals can't get hurt if they wander." The air was cold, and the world sparkled with frost. She had never appreciated snow like this before, not when it had always been part of harsh winters at home. Now, it felt almost magical. As they walked, Ethan pointed out small details: the tracks of rabbits in the snow, a nest of birds tucked into a bush, and the way the sunlight made the icicles glow. Clara found herself smiling for the first time in days, distracted from her worries by the beauty around her. They worked quietly together, fixing a few loose boards and securing the gates. Ethan guided her patiently, explaining each step and praising her efforts when she did something well. She felt a small but growing sense of competence, realizing that she was capable of more than she had believed. When they paused to rest, Ethan pulled a small scarf from his coat and wrapped it around Clara's neck. "You're still cold," he said simply. "Better safe than sorry." Clara felt the warmth of the scarf and a strange sense of comfort. You really care?" she said softly, almost to herself. Ethan smiled gently. "I care about keeping people safe. That's all." She had spent so long thinking that safety and kindness were rare, and yet here was someone showing it in small, real ways. It wasn't about grand gestures or promises. It was about presence, patience, and quiet actions that built trust. After they finished the chores, they returned to the barn, where the warmth of the loft welcomed them. Clara settled on the hay, wrapping herself in the blanket again, feeling tired but strangely content. The barn had become more than a shelter from the storm. It had become a place of quiet security where she could gather strength and think clearly. Ethan prepared a small snack for both of them, sharing bread and cheese. They ate quietly, a simple meal comforting in its own way. Clara felt herself opening up more with each passing moment, realizing that trust was something that grew slowly, through shared experiences and gentle patience. "I never thought I could feel calm again," Clara admitted after a while. "Last night I was so scared. I didn't know if I'd make it." "You did," Ethan said quietly. "And you're still here. That matters more than you realize." Clara looked at him, feeling a wave of gratitude. You really helped me," she said. "More than I can explain. I just did what anyone should do, help when someone needs it." The afternoon sun began to sink low, casting golden light across the snow outside. Clara sat quietly, thinking about what had happened since she arrived in the barn. The storm had forced her into an unknown situation, but it also led her to someone who had shown her compassion and patience. She realized that even when life seemed harsh and unforgiving, there were moments of kindness that could make everything feel bearable. Ethan noticed her thoughtful expression. "You've been through a lot," he said gently. "It's okay to feel unsure. You don't have to have all the answers yet." "I know. It's just I've never had someone listen to me like this before, like they really hear me. That's what people should do for each other," Ethan said softly. "Sometimes listening is enough to make someone feel safe." The warmth of his words, combined with the quiet of the barn and the beauty of the snowy world outside, created a strange but comforting feeling in Clara. She felt lighter than she had in weeks, almost as if the weight of her worries had lifted slightly. As the evening approached, the barn was bathed in a soft, warm glow. Clara and Ethan continued to talk, sharing small stories from their lives, memories of childhood, favorite moments of winter, and dreams for the future. The conversation was easy, flowing naturally, as though the events of the storm had created a space where honesty and trust could grow. Clara realized that she was beginning to see Ethan not just as someone who had helped her survive the night, but as someone she could trust with her thoughts and fears. It was a rare and precious feeling, one she had never allowed herself to experience fully before. By the time the last light of day disappeared behind the snowy hills, Clara felt a quiet determination. She knew the storm had changed her in small ways. She had faced fear, found shelter, and discovered that kindness could exist even in the harshest of circumstances. She had met someone who had shown her patience, understanding, and care, a person who had helped her find a safe place, both physically and emotionally. And as she watched Ethan move among the animals, checking on their well-being with quiet attention, Clara realized something important. Even in a world full of uncertainty, there were people who could be trusted, people who could offer safety and warmth when it was needed most. For the first time in a long while, she felt that she could face whatever came next, knowing that she was not entirely alone. The barn had become more than a shelter. It had become a place where trust, hope, and kindness could take root. even amid the harshness of life outside. The morning light crept slowly through the cracks in the barn walls, painting the hay and wooden beams with a soft golden glow. Outside, the snow glimmered under the sun, sparkling like tiny diamonds across the fields. The storm had passed entirely, leaving behind a quiet world wrapped in white. Clara stood by the loft ladder, watching the sunlight play across the snow, her thoughts heavy but determined. She knew she couldn't stay in the barn forever. The warmth and safety she had felt here were temporary, and eventually she would have to return to the world outside. Ethan moved quietly among the animals, filling their water troughs and checking that each stall was secure. He noticed Clara watching him and offered a small, encouraging smile. "You ready to face the day?" he asked gently. The thought of returning home made her stomach twist with anxiety. I don't know," she admitted, her voice quiet. "I'm not sure they'll understand or forgive me for running away." "You're scared," he said softly. "That's normal. But running away doesn't make you wrong. You did what you needed to do to stay safe. That's important." She had spent so many weeks, months even, feeling trapped and unheard. But now, with Ethan's calm presence beside her, she felt stronger, as though she had regained a small piece of herself that had been missing. I need to go home," she said slowly. "But I don't want to go back to the shouting and the fear. I don't want to feel small again." "Then we'll figure it out," he said. "You don't have to go back blindly. We can plan a way to face them, and you'll have someone who understands with you. You're not alone." The words gave Clara a strange sense of relief. For the first time in days, she believed it was possible to face her family without feeling completely powerless. The storm had brought her here, and Ethan's kindness had given her hope she hadn't thought she would ever feel. They moved outside together, the cold air crisp on their cheeks. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked around the property, taking care of final chores and ensuring that nothing had been damaged by the storm. It was work, yes, but it also served as a way to prepare Clara for the outside world, to give her confidence that she could handle what came next. They worked. Clara began to speak more freely, telling Ethan small details about her life at home, how the arguments between her parents often left her feeling invisible, how she struggled to find her voice, and how she longed for a sense of understanding that she rarely received. Each time she spoke, she felt lighter, as if the act of sharing her story was slowly lifting the weight she had carried alone for so long. "You've been carrying a lot by yourself," Ethan said quietly, once she had paused to catch her breath. "It's no wonder you felt trapped. But sharing it now? That's a step forward. You're stronger than you realize." Clara nodded, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She had been so afraid to show vulnerability, so afraid that someone would think less of her. But Ethan's steady, caring presence had shown her that it was okay to feel, to express fear, and to ask for help. For the first time in a long time, she believed that her feelings mattered, that she mattered. By mid-morning, they had finished the chores, and the barn was warm and tidy again. Clara wrapped herself in the blanket she had grown used to over the past day and sat down next to Ethan. They sipped hot tea together, the warmth seeping into their hands and hearts. "I'm still nervous about going home," Clara admitted. "What if they don't listen? What if nothing changes?" Ethan placed a reassuring hand lightly on her shoulder. "Change takes time," he said, "and people don't always listen at first. But you're not the same person who ran away last night. You're stronger, more prepared, and you have someone who believes in you. That makes a difference." Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like a protective blanket. She realized that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about facing fear with support and courage, and with Ethan beside her, she felt ready to take that step. They sat in silence for a few moments, watching the sunlight sparkle across the snow-covered fields. The barn had become more than a shelter. It had become a place of reflection, of healing, and of quiet growth. Clara felt her heart slow, her mind clearing. The storm had been frightening, but it had also led her to this moment, to someone who had shown her kindness and patience when she needed it most. Finally, Clara spoke again. I think I'm ready to go home. I want to try, at least, but I need to do it carefully." Ethan nodded approvingly. "That's the right approach. We can make a plan together. You don't have to rush, and you don't have to face it alone." They spent the next hour discussing how Clara could return home safely, talking through what she might say, how to express her feelings calmly, and ways to protect her own peace. Ethan offered suggestions, but always gently, never forcing a solution. The process gave Clara confidence, a roadmap to navigate a situation that had once felt impossible. As the afternoon wore on, Clara felt a sense of readiness she hadn't felt in a long time. The barn had been her refuge, a place where fear had been replaced with care and understanding. And now it had become a place where she had gained courage. She realized that facing her past did not mean she would lose the safety she had found here. It meant she could carry a piece of this warmth and patience into her life, no matter what came next. Ethan helped her gather her few belongings, making sure she had warm clothes and the essentials for the journey home. He smiled at her gently. "You're ready," he said. "Just remember, you're not alone, and you're stronger than you think." Clara smiled back, feeling a mix of nervousness and determination. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. You're brave. You just needed a little help to see it." The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the snow. Clara took a deep breath, letting the crisp air fill her lungs. She glanced at Ethan, feeling gratitude and a quiet affection. The storm had been terrifying, but it had brought her to a place of warmth and trust. Now, she was ready to face the world again, carrying the lessons of patience, kindness, and courage with her. As they stepped out of the barn together, the crunch of snow beneath their boots echoed in the stillness. Clara felt her heart steady, the fear that had gripped her loosen. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be conversations to have, emotions to navigate, and challenges to face. But she also knew that she had a support system, and that even in difficult moments, she could carry the safety and strength she had found in the barn with her. The walk toward the main road was quiet but purposeful. Clara felt the snow beneath her feet and the cold wind on her face, but she also felt something more powerful, a sense of readiness, a feeling that she could handle what came next. Ethan walked beside her, a steady presence, offering guidance and encouragement when needed, but never overshadowing her independence. Finally, they reached the edge of the property where the path led toward the town and her home. Clara paused, looking back at the barn that had sheltered her through the storm. It had been more than a building. It had been a place of growth, trust, and healing. So happy, she turned back toward Ethan, feeling a rush of gratitude. I'll never forget this," she said softly. "You helped me more than you'll ever know." Ethan smiled gently. "You helped yourself too. You found the courage you already had inside. I just reminded you it was there." Clara nodded, her chest swelling with quiet determination. The world beyond the barn was still uncertain, but she felt ready to face it, armed with patience, courage, and the knowledge that kindness existed, even in unexpected places. As she took her first step onto the path leading home, the snow sparkling around her, Clara felt a strange but wonderful sense of hope. The storm had passed, the world was bright and cold, and she was not the same person who had fled into the night hours ago. She was stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever awaited her, carrying with her the lessons and the quiet strength she had found in the hayloft beside Ethan. And as Ethan watched her walk toward her future, he whispered softly, almost to himself, "You'll be all right. You're safe now, and you'll carry that safety with you wherever you go." The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the snow-covered fields. The air was crisp, cold, and clean, the kind of winter air that made every breath feel like a gift. Clara adjusted her scarf and took a deep breath, steadying herself for the journey ahead. The road home was still lined with deep snow, but the storm had finally passed, leaving a world that felt calm, quiet, and full of possibilities. She glanced at Ethan, who walked beside her with his usual calm presence, and felt a mix of gratitude and nervousness. Today, she would return home, but she carried with her a new sense of courage. "You ready?" Ethan asked gently, glancing at her. Clara nodded, clutching her small bundle of belongings. "I think so," she said softly. "I want to try. I want to make things right, or at least try to explain myself. That's all anyone can ask. Remember, take your time. You don't have to do everything perfectly. Just be honest and true to yourself." At her. They began the walk toward town, the crunch of snow beneath their boots echoing softly in the still morning air. Clara's thoughts raced as they approached familiar streets and houses. She felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. How would her parents react? Would they understand? Would they even listen? But then she reminded herself of the strength she had found in the barn, of the patience and kindness Ethan had shown her. That strength, she realized, was hers to carry now. When they reached the edge of her neighborhood, Clara paused. The small houses were nestled close together, their chimneys puffing out thin streams of smoke, the windows decorated with faint traces of holiday cheer. It was a world she had known all her life, but it felt different now, less threatening somehow, because she carried with her a newfound courage. Ethan stopped beside her, placing a reassuring hand lightly on her shoulder. "You can do this," he said quietly. "I'll wait here until you're ready." "Thank you." With one final glance at the snowy street and at Ethan, she stepped forward toward her house. The door was closed, and the faint glow of indoor light suggested her parents were awake. Her heart pounded as she approached, but she repeated Ethan's words to herself. "Take your time, be honest, and be true to yourself." She raised her hand and knocked gently. There was a pause. Then the door opened. Her mother's face appeared first, wide-eyed with surprise. Behind her, her father emerged, his expression a mix of confusion and concern.
"Clara?" her mother asked softly.
"Is that really you? I ran away last night because I was scared. I didn't know what else to do." Her father frowned, but there was no anger in his eyes, only worry. "Why, Clara? What happened?" Clara took a deep breath, recalling the storm, the cold, the fear, and the warmth she had found in the barn. I felt invisible and scared," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I didn't know how to make things better at home, so I ran. But I'm not just scared anymore. I've had time to think. I've learned that I can face things without being afraid, and I need your help to do that." Her parents exchanged a long look, their expressions softening. Her mother stepped forward, wrapping her arms around Clara in a gentle hug. "Oh, Clara," she whispered. "We were so worried about you. We didn't know how much you were hurting." Her father nodded, kneeling slightly to meet her eyes. "We didn't realize," he said, his voice sincere. "We didn't mean to make you feel small or invisible. Thank you for coming back and telling us how you feel." Clara felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of relief. She realized that facing her parents was not the end of her journey, but it was a necessary step toward understanding and connection. For the first time in a long while, she felt heard. I want to try to explain more," she said. "I want us to understand each other better. I don't want to run away again." Her mother smiled softly, taking Clara's hand. "We can do that together," she said. "We can listen to each other. We can work on this as a family." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, a quiet gesture of support. "We'll be patient. We'll make it right, together." Clara nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest that went beyond the cold outside. She realized that courage was not just about running away, it was also about returning, speaking honestly, and trusting that people could understand. The lessons she had learned in the barn, the patience, the kindness, the quiet strength, were now hers to carry into her life. After a few moments of quiet conversation, Ethan stepped forward from where he had been waiting. Clara's parents turned to him, surprised. "Hello," Ethan said softly, offering a polite nod. "I helped Clara through the storm last night. She's very brave, and I just wanted to make sure she was safe." Her mother smiled warmly at him. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "You've done more than you know." Ethan nodded, smiling gently. "She's stronger than she thinks. Just needed a little guidance. And some warmth, of course." Clara laughed quietly, the sound light and free. She felt the weight of fear lift further, replaced by gratitude and a quiet happiness. For the first time, she saw that support and care could exist in the world, even in the smallest gestures. The conversation turned to lighter topics as the day passed. Clara shared stories of her experience during the storm, of the barn, and of the quiet moments that had given her courage. Her parents listened, asking gentle questions, expressing concern and pride. Ethan stayed for a while, helping bridge the understanding between them, but he never overshadowed Clara. Instead, he offered quiet reassurance, guiding her to find her voice without taking it away. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the snowy street, Clara felt a sense of completion. She had faced the fear that had driven her to run, she had spoken her truth, and she had found understanding and support in her family. But most importantly, she realized she had found strength within herself. The storm had tested her, the barn had sheltered her, and Ethan had reminded her that courage and kindness existed in the world. Her parents suggested a small Christmas celebration, just the three of them, to honor Clara's safe return. They'd baked cookies together, decorated the small tree in the living room, and shared quiet laughter over simple stories. But Clara, every small moment felt precious, a reminder that even after fear and uncertainty, life could offer warmth and connection. Ethan stayed just long enough to ensure that Clara felt comfortable and confident with her family before excusing himself. "You're ready?" he said quietly, giving her a small nod. "I know you can handle this." "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly, "for everything. I won't forget you or this night?" Ethan nodded, his expression kind. "You've done all the work yourself. I just helped you see it. Remember that courage, Clara. Keep it with you." With that, he left, stepping into the snow and walking back toward his own home. Clara watched him go, feeling a sense of closure and peace. The storm had passed, and life, though still challenging, felt manageable. She had survived, grown, and discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. As night fell and the lights of her home glowed softly against the snowy world, Clara settled into her family's warmth. The journey ahead would not always be easy, but she now knew that she could face it. She had found safety, understanding, and hope, not just from the barn, from Ethan, or from her family, but from within herself. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt truly safe, truly seen, and truly strong. The storm had passed, and with it, a new beginning had emerged. She had faced fear, discovered courage, and embraced the warmth of connection. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, the snow sparkling quietly outside, she knew that no matter what challenges came, she could carry the lessons of that night and the kindness she had experienced with her always. The barn, the storm, and the quiet strength of a kind stranger had changed her life. And now, Clara was ready to step into her future, carrying safety, courage, and hope in her heart, a reminder that even in the coldest storms, light and warmth could always be found.